Hey YouTube, we are watching Tim Cain Game Design Portfolio. This is something we were talking about on stream a couple days ago, or yesterday, I think exactly it was, about how difficult it is for game designers to make portfolios because a lot of the stuff you work on is under NDA, right? You know, your game design documents, the GDD, or it's just not something that is very easy to visualize or to put into context, right? If you look at a mesh from an artist or a texture, you can kind of quantify some of the quality of that mesh or that texture. But with game design, if you take a look at a spreadsheet for balance, you don't really have the context of how well that balance worked apart from looking at like user reviews, right? And that's extra steps that's required by the interviewer or the person reviewing your portfolio. So a game design portfolio is hard to recommend or hard to it's hard to say what makes a good game design portfolio, but it also depends on what kind of designer you are, right? Because game design is a much larger breadth of knowledge and skills. You might be a narrative designer, you might be in level design, which some people clump into game design. And of course, level design and narrative design, it is a bit easier to put those into portfolio and to quantify those things. But generalist game designers or systems designers, you might just say, okay, here's the game and here's the systems that I worked on. But of course, that's you'd probably put like a portfolio reel together. This is the game, here's the system, and maybe a bit of talking about how it worked. But you know what? Let's jump into what Tim Cain says, because maybe I'm completely off the mark. And Tim, if you're ever seeing this, thank you again for giving me permission to make reactions to these. Really appreciate it. And if I ever step on your toes, let me know, and I can stop doing this. Don't worry.
Hi everyone, it's me, Tim.
Hi, Tim.
Today I want to talk about your game design portfolio,
Uh-oh.
or more specifically, what you as a game designer should include in a portfolio that you're sending to a game company when you apply for a job.
Okay.
This is me answering game dev Tommy, who asked for quote advice on what a game design portfolio should really consist of and how it should be presented for someone who has not worked in a mainstream studio yet.
A very good question.
Good question. So let me talk about exactly what I want to see. I'm going to divide it into what I expect to see and what I'd really like to see.
Okay.
So the expectation part is you really should include this. The I like part is if you got this, it's what I want to see, and it'll move you to the top of the pile.
That's good. I'm going to be making notes too, right? Just in case I have to apply somewhere in the future, which I'm 30 years old. It's not unlikely that I will have to work at another place sometime. And I was working on a portfolio like website because I just didn't like there were two things. Like number one, I was really I'm kind of like mad but not like, in a malicious way that a lot of my previous work is just really hard to showcase. Like when I've done balancing, what do I share? Because even at that point, the spreadsheet that I made for that company it's owned by that company, so I can't even show that. Or all the documents I've written, right? Or all of the little notes and the meetings. It's just so much of game design is like day-to-day work that you never really show externally. It's the result, the external result of that is the game itself, right? And whether or not it's well received for its game design. And of course, a game that is pretty low scored could just be low scored because it's full of bugs or something, or there was some bad blood between the developers and publishers, and all these things can affect score. And unfortunately, a lot of interviewers will just take a look at like, oh, they worked on this game, 40% on Steam, bad. Even though it could be that the game itself is well designed, but there were other things that were, negatively impacting the player experience. But generally speaking, Steam review score is very important, not only for the developers themselves, like as a company, but also the individual developers if they want to go seek jobs elsewhere. The sales of a game are not necessarily as important, right? Because those reflect on in most cases, the publisher's ability to market that game. It is the publisher who greenlit that game, who funded the development, and in most cases, it is the responsibility of the publisher primarily to sell the game. So review score is really important for the developers. Sales numbers are more important for the publishers if you have one. And if you are self-published, well, they both matter then in that case.
Before you start, though, you should probably. I've already done a video called How to Get a Job in the Industry. I'll link it below.
Make games.
Followed by the crux of that video, which is make a demo. Make a demo. Make a demo. I repeat myself,
Yep.
I know,
Anomalies.
but I keep finding people going, but I'm like, make a demo. I don't have a make a demo.
It's simple. It's just there's so many qualities and capacities of the individual that can be shown when you make a demo or make a game. It doesn't even have to be complete. Like game jam games are also exceptional. The reason why I recommend game jams is because it's, I think I have a video on this, but I'll say it again. You're working in a team. You're working with other people, and if you're getting a job in the industry, making solo games is great, but it doesn't indicate how well you as an individual can work in a team. That's where that game jam experience comes in, because it shows, yes, you can make a game. Yes, you can work in a bit of a fast-paced need like this, but you can also communicate and work with other people, ideally, right? Because maybe you didn't work well with those people, but usually if you have a lot of game jam experience, it does indicate that you are at least somewhat better than not being able to interact with people at all. Now, the good thing is the game dev industry is full of people who are, in many cases, very socially awkward. You don't have to be very good socially, you just have to be a good team player. And you can kind of work on those social skills as you're in the industry. But yes, make a demo, make game jams. It doesn't have to be completed, it doesn't have to be good. Show progress, right? Your first game, everybody's first game is going to be kind of terrible. Just keep working and be proud of the fact that you came from this and you went to this. And you should show that on your portfolio, because it shows how fast you progress and how dedicated you are to getting better at things that you weren't previously good at. And it shows humility too, when you can show that, yeah, this was trash. It was horrible. It was unbalanced. There were tons of bugs. And you know what? I learned a lot from that, and now my second game has fixed those issues. One could possibly turn this dude into a monster for a game. You're running and he chases you, saying make a demo. He's right. I mean, it's the thing. It's like when you are asked for advice in the industry, that it's what you say. It's if you know what you're talking about, you say make a demo, make a game, work with other people, and it doesn't even have to be good. It just has to show progress. It's just a lot of people are unwilling to jump into that, either because they're afraid that they're going to suck, and the truth is you are, and that's okay. But that is okay, and or they don't know where to start, and I think that is a very fair, kind of lost in the forest kind of feeling, right? And I think it's better now than it was like 10 years ago when I started, where you pretty much only had like Unity and Game Maker were your entry level engines, and Game Maker was really friendly for people who didn't know programming very well. Unity was very friendly for people who knew programming, but you didn't have so many resources available to you. You didn't really have books of how to make your first game in Unity, how to make your first game in Game Maker. There weren't big YouTube tutorials. There weren't a lot of courses and free assets that you could use to kind of augment that start, right? So it was really like, if you wanted to get started in Unity, in many cases you had to know somebody who could do like some of the modeling and texturing, or you had to do that yourself. And so you ended up with, default Blender cube with non-tiling crate texture attached to it as your crate in a game. And it's kind of fun that way, but nowadays it is so easy just to jump on, platforms like now Fab for Unreal, and to find Pirates Stilt Village Island Modular Pack for free. And it's just there, and it just works, and you can just pull it in Engine, and it looks good. And all you really need to know is how to get started with some blueprints, or download a few things just to get started with some of the systems. And it's so much easier to get started now, thankfully. So there really is no excuse. If you're looking to get into the industry, just start making something. Load up an engine, do a quick tutorial to learn how to, move around some of the hotkeys, get familiarized, how to pull in assets and place them in a scene and press play. And just get started and just keep challenging yourself, because if you're not challenging yourself, you're not learning. And if you are challenging yourself too much and hitting brick walls, you're also not learning. You need to take things one small step at a time. Don't jump for your dream MMO game. Jump for something that you can learn and apply to your next idea that will get bigger and bigger and bigger and better and better until you can start to tackle these larger projects step by step. I am yapping on and on about things that aren't necessarily, well, they're kind of related to game design, but I will let Tim continue here. Sorry, Tim.
But I can't make a demo. There's code, there's art, there's so much stuff available.
Yes.
The excuses went out 5 to 10 years ago on why you shouldn't have a demo. And bear in mind, other people are making demos. So when you don't make a demo, it kind of...
He's right. I mean, he's 100% correct. Especially if you're a junior in the industry, just know that as you move up in the industry, your ability to get a job will increase because there are fewer people competing with those positions. And arguably, there are more positions available at regular and senior levels than there are at junior levels. That's just an unfortunate reality of our industry. So when you're at that junior level, you need to stand out. You need to. You need to do the things that the other people are not doing. And one of the things that a lot of those newbies aren't doing is making games.
shows you're like, nah, I didn't feel like it. I don't really care about this that much. I don't want it.
Not the industry for you at that point.
You may also want to look at a video. So I have a video on that. I have another video on questions I tend to ask job candidates, and it's broken up into programmer candidates and design candidates.
I think we saw
highly
that.
recommend you watch the one on design candidates so you can be prepared for those questions. And some of them, if you already have something in your design portfolio that would answer a question I have, like if I'm like, how would you design a crafting system, or how would you design an intro level in WoW? And you might go, I've already done that. Here you go.
Yeah, those are pretty common questions. I don't think we've seen the one. I think we saw the one on coding, but not the one on... I don't know. I'd have to look. But yeah, you just get asked a lot, especially if you're like a systems designer, how you design a crafting. Or like, give me your game idea and then, specific questions about that idea. So like, what are some of the progression systems? Is there a crafting system? Or design this game with a crafting system and then tell us a bit more about how crafting works and how it progresses. I'm happy with these. I think, though, that I've done one test where an interviewer, or it wasn't an interviewer, but they tasked me with writing up some stuff, and they told me to limit it to 1 page, and I wasn't really happy with that. I understand that they want it to be concise, but also some of the questions they were asking were very difficult to answer the way they wanted in 1 page of space, and I did it, and then they said, "Oh, it's not enough," and it's like, well, you told me 1 page, but then it's not enough. I don't know what you want from me at this point then. And some things I think are game design on paper is not necessarily game design in practice. So it's very important to be able to communicate via paper, via text, via images, flowcharts, whatever. But also you need to be able to put that into practice and prototype it, I think, as a game designer, especially a systems designer. So I would say I would be okay with a designer who could reasonably communicate via text what they intend to do, but then prototype it a bit and then come back and write up more after they've, seen, oh, this was not a good idea. This was pretty decent in practice. I didn't know that we needed to add this, right? Flesh out those unknowns a bit more. So I don't know. Game design tests they're hit or miss for me, to be honest. But for the most part, I've done pretty well on those tests. But again, you're just competing with people who have more. And even though I've done some and they get back to me and say, yeah, you did great on your test. It was everything we asked for. But this person had more experience, or this person just had a little bit more than you. And it's like, well, that's why you got to keep working. That's why you got to keep making demos, as Tim says, or just keep working on games and show that you are progressing even when you don't have a job. And it sucks to say that, but every little bit makes a difference in this industry. It is very competitive, very cutthroat, and any sort of red flag, or what's the word? What I'm trying to say? Like a gap in your resume is going to stand out and is going to look bad. And 6 months of you not working on games, even because you didn't have a job, I'm sorry, but somebody else applying for that job is going to have that 6 months filled in with working on games, and it's not a great thing to say. It doesn't sound good. It isn't very positive, but it is the reality.
Awesome. So now let's talk about. I'm going to jump into the a couple of things that I expect to see in any game designer's portfolio when they
Okay,
apply for a job.
let's see if I have
I'm
it
going to
in my
break those
portfolio.
things down into broad things that I expect and a couple things of depth I expect. So for the breadth, I'm basically saying, show me various designs in whatever you are applying
Yeah.
for. Are you a system designer? Show me a design for combat, inventory, conversation, and quests. Show me that you really understand system mechanics in a game, especially an RPG, because that's what I like to make.
Yeah, it's. I think the breadth is definitely important just to show that you aren't you aren't just specialized in making inventory systems or something. And again, it's like if you've made if you've worked on a one full game, that kind of answers it, right? Where like the train game that I worked on about 80% of that game's systems. So everything from the management to the way that the train handled to the design of the inputs. I designed a tutorial, which was way too long as a tutorial, and like the signaling system, the AI trains, everything. And so all of that stuff, that shows that I can handle multiple things, not just specializing in one little system. So yeah, for me as a systems designer, I hope I have that nailed, but my portfolio doesn't reflect that very well.
If you just show me combat mechanics,
You're a combat designer.
first of all, that's self limiting. And also, I may not be looking to hire a combat system mechanic designer.
Yep.
Show me you can do a lot of different systems. Similarly, are you,
And again, I think there is an asterisk here though, is that this depends to me on the specialization needed. So smaller teams, double A teams, you're probably going to be looking to you're going to want to show that you are generalist a bit more, that you can wear multiple hats, or that if they were to throw you a wrench as an assignment, you could deal with that wrench. If you're working in like AAA, where you are 1 out of 1,000 on a team, it's probably okay for you to be specialized, and in many cases, you might even look more ideal as a candidate for combat systems designer if you're just showing combat systems design. They're like, oh, this guy he's purely focused on combat systems. This is exactly what we need.
if you're a level designer, show me different area types. Show me you can do a forest and then a desert and a dungeon.
I think too, more than that, also show that you can handle different genres, right? Or that if you're applying for a job as a level designer for a horror game, show me at least one level, playthrough, walkthrough of that level in that horror game, right? Rather than just showing me like action games, right? Because you have to level design these games in very different ways.
Those show very different skills because a forest tells me you know how to convey this is a forest without completely blocking line of sight. Where desert
Like
says, I
me.
can make this feel like a desert, even though it's supposed to feel sparse. I want it to still feel like a desert. I'm not just
Yeah,
giving you a flat,
it's a good point.
brown plain. And then for a dungeon, like I know how to do interior spaces, and I know how to reserve some for combat, and some for exploration, and some for puzzles. And
Yeah, dungeons are big too because they're pacing, right? You can't just have back to back rooms of combat because then it just feels like a slog to get through it. And I think we've all played games where it feels like that. You need to pace it out a bit and have those rooms where it's like, okay, this is a combat focused room. This room has a couple of smaller enemies, but it's got also a puzzle and allows the player to kind of just relax and gather new resources or get like a health potion from some breakable crates so that they can replenish before the next combat room. Pacing matters. Pacing matters a lot.
I know how to put in secret doors, and I know how stairs take up space. Show me. Don't tell me. Show me. And then, in addition to different area types for level designers, show me you know how to show spaces that'll be used for different types. And I've already mentioned some of them, like show me you know how to make a combat space in an interior. Show me how you know how to make a
That's a good
puzzle.
point.
Give me a puzzle. Give me a demo of a character, and there's a puzzle I have to solve. Show me you know how to give clues. You know how to make it challenging, but also fun.
And this is exactly why, he says make a demo, right? But work on a game. And I think that you will struggle very heavily as a designer in the industry if you do not have applicable engine experience. And you might have been able to get away with that, further back a little bit, or you might be able to get away with that if you're in a larger team, but smaller teams, especially anything under 100, I would say, you need to have engine experience and you need to be able to think outside the box. And if they say, look, we can you just implement this in blueprints to prototype it as a level designer, and you can't say yes to that, your likelihood of getting hired is dramatically lower, dramatically lower.
If you're doing an exterior, show me how to about PO that you understand POIs, points of interest. Does your exterior have things I can see so I can orient myself? Do I know I'm going north or south without having to look for a compass UI?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and that's one of the things that I'm trying to get better at is just like landmark based level design. The example that we give, because I think it's it's still relatively recent game, um, is Elden Ring. Elden Ring is a masterpiece of landmark based level design where you can just look and see things that you can go explore and that look interesting to you. And even though you have a compass, you don't often use the compass for the direction that you're going. It's more there to be like, oh, am I for sure heading north? Yeah, okay, just okay, double checking. But everything that you can see that looks like a point of interest that is interesting is noticeable just purely based on the level design of the game itself. It really is a masterpiece of this. A lot of Liurnia shots, that's for sure. Looking for some Limgrave shots. Limgrave, because Limgrave is right where you start the game, right? And you have the castle there and the Erd tree. This is another one. It's like, okay, this right here is close. It's interesting. I can see a save point close by there, and of course an enemy that I would have to get past. But also, if I can't fight that enemy, or if that enemy is a little bit tough for me, I can just go around it, or I can go to some other locations that I can see in the distance or close by to the left and right. It really is. If you're a level designer and you haven't played Elden Ring, please play Elden Ring. I think there's a lot you can learn from it.
Because there's a mountain range to the north, or there's a big plateau over there on the east. So when I see it on my right, I know I'm headed north.
And having unique things like that too also just allows players to communicate with each other. Like, oh, it's the castle by the plateau. And if there's only one really noticeable plateau, it stands out, right? It stands out and it's easy to say, oh, I know where the plateau is. Okay, I'll go look around there for a castle.
Show me these things. Don't talk about them, show them. Similarly, if you're a narrative designer, write wildly different characters. I've mentioned this in other videos, but if you show me 4 characters and they're all just sarcastic NPCs that you think show off your ability to be snarky, seen it before, and especially if all 4 of them are like that, show me you can write a character that's not like you. Show me you can write a sociopath. Show me you can write somebody who's funny. Show me you can write someone who is so entitled it blocks their entire view of what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, character flaws. It's just, if you're being hired to write for a game, it's most likely that you are expected to write a diverse cast of characters, ones that might have those flaws and might have different upbringings or different, maybe the character is supposed to be racist. Maybe you're not supposed to like them. Maybe you're supposed to understand why they have certain views that you may not agree with those views, but you can understand how they grew up in that environment and think that way, right? I mean, you see that a lot with people who are mistreated or have bad experiences and then turn those into, their shells of protection is to avoid people that have given them those experiences or like similar to people the ones that have given them those experiences. Sorry, it's kind of worded wrong, but you see that a lot. And it's like, you have to understand characters. And I think you also need to not get blinded by your own views of individuals. If you want to write really good characters, you need to be able to say, yes, I don't like this person in real life, but it makes for a compelling character. And maybe the point of this story is for you to break down those flaws and walls of that individual to, reform them, or for them to reform themselves more enjoyably.
They are owed this. Of course you would do this. That kind of thing. I want to see this, and I want it conveyed to me through their dialogue. I don't want them to tell me I'm entitled. I'm funny. Again, show me, don't tell me. And then finally, if you're a UI designer, again, show me a variety of things. Don't just show me a HUD and go, yeah, I did that HUD. Show me an options menu with all the different things that may have to come up because maybe graphics options are done one way and sound options are done another. Show me you can do inventory. Inventory's tough. Show me a couple ways you handled inventory from in different designs. Show me
Tim, Tim, never look at my UI design. I promise you, not good.
a quest log. And from that quest log, I should kind of understand the underlying mechanic that you either designed or assumed. So that's the breadth. That's the breadth of a portfolio.
Hear me, Tim.
For depth, take one of those above things and go deep. And by deep, I mean it's either big. So if you're a level designer and you made a forest, make a big forest. And when I go through it, have paths in the forest, have a creek in the forest, have a little hut out there in the forest, have, an encounter space in the forest. Do all these things to show me you can make a big, realized level.
The nice thing is, I think, as a level designer, if we go back to this Fab example, you can get packs like this, especially also on like Humble Bundle. You can get a lot of packs that will just work together quite well, and just make levels with them. They don't even need to have any gameplay. Just pull in like the default first person, character blueprint, and just take something like this ultimate Unreal Mega Bundle, ending in 5 hours, by the way, if you're interested. And you'll have some packs in here like this Mountaintop Observatory and Castle Grimgard. Oh, hold on. I think these look pretty good. And just take some of these assets and work with them to make your own levels using these. And, maybe level design is a bit... This is probably better for level artists than level designers, but you can still find some, like, packs of, like, just basic shooting of enemies, and basic enemy AI that will rush you, and you can throw those in there and, use really simple game mechanics and interesting levels to make an interesting combination of both. Most games that are really fun don't have super complex, unless they're like, simulators or like, I don't know, Dwarf Fortress or something that rely on mechanics, but there's a lot of really good action games that on the core of their systems and gameplay is pretty simple, but they make the game fun by really interesting level design. Work on stuff like that and try to think in that way. And if you can get a little help getting started with making basic gameplay mechanics, or you can buy packs and asset packs that will do that for you, and then you can just use humble bundles like this to, make interesting environments and levels, you're kind of golden for your portfolio like that. You just have some really awesome packs like this that are pretty good price. You can get all this for, 30 euros, and you're ready to go. There is no excuse. As he says, there is no excuse. And there's tons. There's 2 Unreal and Unity game dev packs. Or one of them is just Unreal, and one of them is Unreal and Unity.
Or go detailed. If you're making I'll switch to something else. Let's say you're making a quest system mechanic and you're writing down.
Okay.
Dive deep. Show me in your design. Talk about a high level set of rules you're going to follow for your quests, and then show me how you have different kinds of quests, different quest types. This is a delivery quest. This is an escort quest. This is a find an item quest. This is a kill an NPC quest. This is explore an area quest. Show me that, and then show me how it would be displayed differently. Show me how the quest talk about how the quest system would change the display on the player's local or world map. Talk about quest markers. Are there different quest markers for different types? Do all the quest markers show up, or do the players have to mark what quest is active, or can they have multiple active ones?
All exceptional questions that just shows how incredible Tim is at design. You know, it's just being able to rattle off low level questions like that is very important, and I think it just shows how knowledgeable he is. But also being able to answer those questions shows how knowledgeable you are as a designer, right? And in this case, like the quest designer or the quest systems designer or just generally systems designer. This all comes with experience, right? Is It's pretty easy to write a high level design for a system or for a game. What really matters though is how you handle it at the low level. Sorry, if you're watching on YouTube, I'm still sick, so I sound a bit stuffy and might cough a bit. You know, a good example of what we've been doing in Colden Chronicles is how our NPC design, right, our NPC system, our RPG systems for the NPC dialogue, I can, you know, pretty easily explain what it is at a high level, but then I need to show how we accomplish that on the low level. You know, how do we actually make it so that the player's potion is scored? I need to, in my portfolio, if I'm going to update it, I need to explain, because I think that's a pretty interesting part of the game, is how we read through the potion data and compare that to the commission data, you know, the expectation by the NPC, and how we match that up and score it, and then how we use that to determine outcomes both in dialogue and for like just generally pathing the encounter. And I think that's what makes the system unique, and I also think that's what needs to be explained the most if I were to make a portfolio with that. There's one extremely important thing about game dev, especially when it comes to more complex games like RPG-ish games. People think it's the technical part. Yes, it is important and hard too, but actually filling everything with data, the quests, the dialogues, the lore, the items, turns out actually the bigger portion of the resource as time consumption. Yeah, Evetta Hall, that's a really really good point, and I think you're spot on. I agree completely. Um, it is, you know, making the systems I think is pretty easy, but then it's like you have to fill it and you have to make it feel good, and feel good is not a boolean check mark that you turn on in the data. It is a combination of so many different moving parts of the game and the content itself. Like, okay, you've made an interesting quest system, but now your NPC is boring as hell, so I'm not having fun. But I could see how with an interesting NPC I could have fun. So now I need to make a good NPC. Pretty sure 5.6 will have that in project settings. Actually, I hope so. I wish. But no, you bring up a really good point about all. 100%.
Multiple active ones. How do they tell the multiple active ones apart?
It's I guess a more succinct way to put it is that it's easier to make a game than it is to make a fun game. If it was easy to make a fun game, every game would be fun, and we wouldn't be sitting here playing Star Wars Outlaws and thinking, "What the hell did I just turn on?"
Go deep.
Shots
Go
fired.
detailed. These are things you're going to have to do if you get hired anyway. So do it now and show me you know how to do it.
That's a good point, Tim.
Another way you can go deep is show me something unique. This is harder because I'm old and I've seen it all. But if you show me something I haven't seen before, and occasionally I will leave a comment on here and I don't even remember where they are, where I've told someone, I've never seen it done that way. I've never seen anyone talk about a mechanic that way. It got my attention because I'm like, it's hard to surprise me. I'm an old guy who's been doing this since he was a teenager.
I'm gonna be honest. 10 years in the industry, it's hard to surprise me too. I cannot imagine how hard it is to surprise Tim. I doubt that anything that I've worked on in Colden Chronicles would surprise Tim. In fact, a lot of the design of Colden Chronicles is pretty safe. I think the most unique part is our how we handle NPCs and the alchemy, where I've turned what would normally be a shopkeeping type of simulator game into an RPG game. But it's more of an interesting mixture of ideas rather than something that is so unique that it blows people's minds. You know, it's not like Red Dead Redemption 2 where I was playing some things and it was like, wow, I I didn't consider that that would have such a large impact on me, or I didn't consider that combination or that usage of things. So yeah, it's rare to surprise me too, but games still sometimes do it, and I really like how it's done. No swords though, yeah. That's Mechanic X, but it's all filled with placeholders now. To move that to real game is a huge step. Actually, a lot of huge steps. Yeah, it's like, okay, you've made it so that the player can hold weapons. Okay, which weapons? What do those weapons do? Do they have different animations? Do they have different hitboxes? Do they deal different damage? What are you fighting? Now you have to add enemies and AI. Now you only have one type of AI. It's the zombie move towards you and attack you until you die sort of AI. Add different AI, add a ranged AI, add one that runs away, or add a condition that runs away when they get low health. Actually start to make it into a real game. And all those things, like you said, it just takes time and it takes a lot of effort and a lot of thought. It's just easy. It's easy to design a game on the surface, on the high level. That's why you should never pay somebody to be the idea person. That's why you should never take high level design so let me reword that. Why you should never consider a designer who delivers you just high level design to be a good designer, because that's the easy part. That anybody on your team can say, would be really cool if we had a system in our game that did X. That's high level design. That doesn't tell me how is it going to be fun, how is the player going to interact with it, how much time is that going to take, do we need sounds for it, do we need UI, how many assets do we need for it, and actually start to break it down into real numbers, which then equals real time and real money. It is hard. It's very difficult.
If you can show me something unique that I haven't shown before, even if it's a unique twist on something that's common that nobody.
That's what I'm hoping. I'm hoping, Tim, if you're watching this, I don't know, maybe my idea for Colden Chronicles, where you're an alchemist, but now we've systems driven the alchemy to make an RPG game. I don't know, maybe that's interesting. Maybe you've never seen that before. Maybe it has existed and you've seen that before and you had that idea 20 years ago and I'm doing nothing new. I don't know.
He's done before. You will have my attention. Which, by the way, for both your breadth and depth things, that's kind of the underlying theme I'm telling you. Get my attention.
Yeah, it's like, would it have been easier for me starting Microraptor to make a 2D platformer game? Yes. Yes. The issue is that it's okay, look, I'm not attacking anybody making those games. I'm just saying I've seen it. I've been on Kickstarter for like, we have, I don't know how many months of Kickstarter reviews that I did. I've seen 2D platformers. I've seen it. They're kind of boring at this point. They most of them didn't do anything new to really grab my attention. And honestly, if they don't grab my attention, they're not going to grab the attention of people on Steam who get fed a million games a minute and have to determine what they want to play. I'm sorry, but if I look at, actually, let me go on Steam, not on this because I'm logged in and it's going to show porn games. Hold on. Give me a second. I don't want to get banned. Incognito mode. If you go on Steam and you look at popular or just all upcoming games, look at this. New and trending, we have, I don't know, up to Indiana Jones, The Great Circle, Beyond Citadel. But then we go to all upcoming releases. There's a million games being released every week, it feels like, and you are not going to see 95% of these, at least. What's the end of the week? What day is the end of the week? It is usually considered Sunday, right? So let's say the 12th. These are all games that are releasing before the 12th. Right up to here. Every game before this is releasing this week. And I promise you, a pretty decent number of these, you've probably already seen this game existing. They're not going to sell enough probably to return on investment, or if they do, it's not going to be that much, and they're just going to be forgotten, unfortunately. And it's not to say that the developers haven't done a lot of work or haven't poured a lot of sweat and tears into this, but the thing is, if you're working on a game for a company, you have to be able to make marketable design decisions. You cannot just be a good designer. You need to be a designer that can also make the company money. That's the reality of games. And that is a separate step. You need to be aware of market trends. You need to be aware of the genre, of the people that you're making the game for, of other games and competition in that, that's competing with your game. Other inspiration. How are you going to be unique? How are you going to be different? Because in the end, most likely your selling points are going to be the unique parts of your game or the unique twists on existing mechanics. And that's what you need to show in your portfolio is how can you go above and beyond what is simply being a designer? How can you make unique mechanics that are actually going to be marketable? And can we trust you with our game to find ways to make it so unique that it stands out in this sea of sometimes I'll just put it this way to be nice. Games that won't sell enough to have return on investment.
If some
It's really nice for a game to be original or unique, to be fun and liked. People like chocolate or ice cream, even if they are the same. The important thing is for the game to be interesting, fun, engaging to play. I don't know. I don't necessarily agree. I think I get what you're saying though, is that you don't need to be original or unique to sell a lot of copies, and that's true. Sometimes something can just hit the market at the right point, right? It can go viral, even if it's something that's already been said and done before. But also, you're more likely to stand out by doing something that hasn't been seen before or that has been seen before, but not to the extent that you've done it. Like I guess you have two options to be super successful in a relatively, what's the word I'm thinking of? Reliable way. Either do something that the market's already seen, but do it better than them, and or do things that are unique that the market hasn't seen before.
something about your portfolio grabs my interest, way more likely I'm going to want you to come in for an interview. I'm going to ask you questions about that thing, and I'm going to want to hire you.
And even, more than your portfolio, I think that maybe, I don't know if Tim will touch on it, but at least when I look at it, and I haven't seen nearly as many portfolios or CVs as Tim has, but one thing that I personally look for is just that journey. Yes, I will take a look at what you've most recently done, but I also want to see how you started because I also want to hire people that are good at learning, are don't have much of an ego, who I feel like will be good team players, who learn fast, who have touched on different things, and for me, the journey from how you started with your shitty game that probably was just, platformer or clicker game and game maker or whatever, and how you achieve now this success that you have most recently, I want to see, how far you've come and how long it's taken you to get there and what you've done in between to augment yourself to learn a bit more and expand your knowledge. I think the overestimation of uniqueness comes from the effort that indies have to put to cover the lack of producing super art assets, which is understandable. Yeah, I think that's a good point. Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. Although I've always, talked about how I'm not a big fan of the term unique selling points, or at least not in the way that some people see them, where it doesn't mean that your game has to do something so new it hasn't been seen before. It has to be something I just like saying selling points rather than unique selling points because it can be a combination. A selling point in your game can be that you have 1,000 playable real cars in your racing game. And it's not like we haven't seen games with a lot of playable cars. It's just that the fact is that the amount is the unique part, right? And so I don't really see it more as a unique selling point, more as just it is a selling point. And this one happens to be unique, as opposed to the interesting part of it is that we're doing it in we're doing it above and beyond any other racing game that's ever been released. And many gamers, hardcore gamers through the years, and actually none of them was so crazy about playing unique. They always actually wanted a good, engaging game. Yeah, and I think that at the end of the day, unique is a way to grab you. An engaging system is a way to engage. I don't know. Maybe there's a better word to use for that, but when I'm reading like the Steam page of, I don't know, Minecraft Dungeons, just say, they're going to shove the unique selling points or just the, unlock over 250 unique artifacts, gear, and enchantments, right? That is one of their selling points, is they have a ton of different things that you can find, equip, and collect. Here's a selling point. It's not unique, but this is a selling point. Up to 4 players can team up and fight together in co-op mode. Personalize your character, then fight up close and personal with melee swings, hang back with ranged attacks, or tank your way through swarms of mobs, shielded by heavy armor. Again, this is not a unique selling point. It's just a selling point. It shows you can play this game in many different ways. No matter if you like going in as a tank or hanging back as a ranged or spellcaster, we have you covered. And bosses, right? Explore treasure stuffed levels in a quest to take down the evil Arch Illager. Again, most of these aren't unique. In fact, I would say none of them are unique, especially to an ARPG game. But it's the fact that it's combined with a IP that probably the most unique selling point here, is that it's Minecraft, right? Otherwise, this probably may not get as much interest. But most of these are just selling points, not unique selling points, and that's okay. Your game just needs to show that it is interesting to the niche, to the audience that you are pitching this to, and that you are expecting to purchase your game. So I agree with you, Vedahall, that the what am I trying to say here? The obsession with unique selling points probably is not as important as just having selling points and knowing what makes your game fun to play.
So those are the things I expect. Now let me talk about a couple things that I hope for. I wish to see this in every portfolio, but I often don't.
Okay.
The first thing is, hopefully the thing you go deep on is something that we do at the company I'm at, in the game.
Yeah, because it's just more ideal. It's like, oh, okay, this person is a perfect fit rather than this person is a potential fit. People can learn, people can, find interesting things. You can say that you love deep RPG systems, but if you've never made any deep RPG systems, you're unlikely to be hired to work with deep RPG systems, right? And I like to work with deep RPG systems. The problem is that on Darkest Dungeon, I was so new, I didn't really get the chance. On the train game that I worked on, it wasn't an RPG game, right? So there wasn't really any RPG systems I would play there. And I wasn't working on Forever Skies long enough to make really much of an impact on the game at all. I wanted to work on something that showed that I love RPG systems and deep RPG systems, so that's why I worked on Golden Chronicles as my first game, as opposed, again, to a game that I probably could have accomplished easier, which is like a platformer. I wanted to jump into something, even if I failed, that showed my interest and my ability to make these things that I enjoy making.
Things we work on. Now,
Hopefully
if
it
it's
works.
not, then at least one of your broad things has to be. And this is where you can customize your portfolio to fit the company you're applying to.
And that one point is so important. I've done it myself. When you're applying for like 50 jobs, I get it. You need a job. You need money. It's just a reality of life. And I think anybody who's had a long streak of not being employed, we all understand. We all know what that feels like. It is demoralizing. It is kind of embarrassing. It's depressing. And you often don't have the energy to do more than 2 to 3 applications a day, especially if you are somewhat catering your application to that company, like writing a cover letter that is specifically for that company, right? You put a lot of time and effort into writing that. You kind of get sloppy, I think, where it's like, oh, I'm just going to send my CV and my portfolio. It's the same for every company. But in reality, Tim's right. You do need to specialize your portfolio for the company that you're applying to. And I think that it's more important to send 2 to 3 important resumes a week, like catered, handmade, tailored for that company, along with a cover letter, than it is to send 10 to 20 a week that are just copy and paste the same cover letter or the same portfolio. It's you'll get much further with those 2 to 3 than you would with those 10 to 20.
If you're applying to me and I'm Tim Cain, the RPG guy,
Yeah.
working at an RPG company, and you give me a bunch of designs for FPSs, you can maybe understand why I'm like, okay,
Good work,
this
but
person
yeah.
really knows first-person shooters. Too bad we're not making one. Maybe if I have a combat system design open and I'm like, oh, this person really understands gunplay, maybe. But you should customize your portfolio to call that out. Hey, see you're looking for a combat system designer. I know guns.
And again, like I
Great.
said, I get it. I get that you're just looking for a job and you're like, look, I can do my best at it. I can try. I can get better. The problem is there isn't always that leeway in game development, and even if they are like, yes, in an ideal world, we could give you this experience, except that there are two candidates that sent in portfolios that are more specified for what we're looking for. The reality is you're not going to get the job if you aren't if you aren't catering your portfolio or you aren't applying to places and games that are that are making the thing that you want. One thing though that I would say is kind of frustrating as somebody applying for a job, I would really like to see more employers talk about the games they're making for new unannounced titles. I understand that you want to keep it private, you don't want to talk about it, but just tell me a little bit about the game so that I can read it and say, oh, yes, that is something that I want to work on and I'm pretty good at working on, as opposed to, we have this experience and we're working on a new title. Do you want to join us? It's like, well, maybe you're working on a game that's similar to that. Maybe not. I don't know. I'll send you what I have, but now I don't know what you're doing.
Right. So that's the first one that I hope to see. The second one is, I'm just going to repeat myself because I keep saying this and people keep
Demo?
either ignoring it or arguing with me. I hope that something you did, either one of your broad designs or your deep design, is an executable, is a demo, is something I can see in practice, something I can play with. Now, this isn't necessary, but it is awesome. I've talked about how much I like demos. I don't know how I can repeat myself anymore. Also, I love designers who know how to code. You don't have to be the best programmer in the world. I think a designer that knows how to code is way better at structuring their design.
Yes, 100%.
And I have noticed that designers who know how to code talk better to programmers and get programmers more involved in their design because they wrote it kind of knowing this can be coded, and a designer or a programmer sees that and goes, oh yeah, I can do that.
I mean, that's beyond factually correct. I'm not trying to like say, yes, Tim, you're right, because I also thought that, but more just like, he's so right because it's kind of like my specialization is I'm a designer with coding background as opposed to designer with art background, but broadening your knowledge of those, two kind of other pillars of games, which is coding and art. Like you said, it just makes you talk better and it makes you think that way. And I think that's one of the biggest things that separates a junior designer from a more senior designer, is that the senior designer likely has more of that broad knowledge, has worked on games, has spent years talking to artists and programmers, and kind of understands their lingo or understands some of the things that they face, the challenges they face that maybe the designer didn't think about before. Or is like, oh yeah, I constantly, make designs without sound in mind. I need to keep getting better at that and start to, maybe talk to sound designers like, oh, okay, you want a list of when sounds are used. Okay, you need an asset list as well with that. So let's, put that in the pipeline in the correct order so that we get these things to each of the departments the way that they need to be gotten to. And yeah, I agree with Tim. It's just, not only will a designer who probably has coding experience talk better with coders, but it's likely that they can at least prototype it. Even if you're not working in Unreal or GameMaker or Unity or whatever, Fortnite, UEFN, a lot of these engines or built-in, level editors for other games can act as exceptional prototyping tools for you to quickly show off what you're intending to make. And I promise you that all of my experience making prototypes for programmers before delivering them the design document, or, let me rephrase that, delivering that along with the design document has led to a dramatic decrease in stress and problems implementing that system into the game. And more likely than not, the variation in quality or bugs or things that, weren't implemented the right way is much, much lower with that prototype, because they can just look back at this and say, oh yeah, this is how it's meant to be. I've also delivered design documents with structures actually written, like, this is the way that I envision the structure for the data table. Here's the explanation of what this this float variable does that I see. I need it as a float, not as an integer. And when I say that, it's so that because in my mind it's like, oh, well, I'm going to design this with some in-between values in mind, and I need that implemented, and that just saves them time. It also says, oh, we're done implementing the system, the data table's ready for you to set up. I might have already done some balancing work based on the way that I know that this system is set up, and I can just quickly import that into Unreal and we're ready to go. Well, there's that if your design is not king but production is king, often that prototypes are treated as implementation that need just little work from programmer. Yeah, I mean there are different ways to go about it, where you go like prototype first and then you iterate on top of that. I think though that you'll see that designers in production like that, you'll see that designers are being hired who can create that initial implementation, and then programmers can pick it up from there. And I think it's okay. I think that also the better your prototype, you often can I won't say slack off, but you don't need to write as much for your design document, because you can just say, well, it's supposed to work like supposed to work like that. You should still write some stuff up for design, but you can get away without having to be so verbose in your design documents by just making a prototype, and you can say, yeah, this is how the fishing should work. UI is shit right now because I'm the one that implemented it, but you can just deliver that. You can say, here's the prototype of fishing. It takes you, you can cheat in all the ingredients. Here's a little bit of rules of how to play it and how to work it. Go play it for 10 minutes. And it's going to take a lot less time to play it for 10 minutes than to read a design document for 10 minutes. And you'll understand more of it at the end of the day. What's that issue with programmer giving too good programming example and task description? Too good programming example and task description. Tell me what you mean by that.
Of course you can. The designer kind of thought about how it would be coded.
Yes.
And if you are worried about what engine you should do it in, don't.
Doesn't matter.
Use whatever engine you're comfortable with.
It doesn't matter for prototyping which engine you use, but obviously in-engine experience does matter somewhat. It matters somewhat.
Or pick an engine that's appropriate for this kind of game. If it's a side scroller, pick an engine that makes side scrollers easier. If it's, first person game, pick something that does that. I care less about the engine. In fact, if you just send me the executable, I might not even know what engine you did it in. I can guess probably, but I won't know. Just remember, a demo or anything else that grabs my attention will move that portfolio to the top of the queue. That's what you want to do. So, Game Dev Tommy, I hope this answered your question, and I hope other people found this useful as well.
A fantastic video. I mean, as somebody who's had to work on a game design portfolio or a CV, mine is shit. Mine is just horrible, and it's we talked about it before on this channel, but it's one of the reasons that I started this company was actually because my portfolio was horrible. I didn't have a lot that I could show. I didn't have a lot that I had worked on some things alone, but they were pretty old, and most of my portfolio from recent titles that I've worked on the past 5 years are all under NDA, and the documents are owned by the company, so it wasn't like I could show off the work that I used to get to that point. And working on my own game gives me the freedom to say, well, I own all of this, so I can just show, and I've recorded all the gameplay or all the development and all the gameplay, and so I can just show all my work for it. It's like, oh yeah, here's me working on the NPC dialogue system. Here's me making the first implementation that was all data driven, and it was horrible, and so I bought Narrative 3. I learned how to use Narrative 3, and then we customized Narrative 3 to fit our needs and took it one step further. All of this is very useful, knowledge for a game designer that makes my portfolio look better in the end. So I think he's right. It's just show that you can do what you need to do, show a wide variety of what you can do for whatever type of design that you're applying for, and really start to show, to think about how you are unique from the other 10, 20, 100 designers that are applying for the same job that you're applying for. Think about what their CVs might look like and where yours is lacking. Do you have a 6-month gap? Do you not have any recent examples of the games that you've made? Do you not have any gameplay of the 2 games that you made for a game jam? Are you afraid that that's going to make you look worse? Because it's not. Programmers were just implemented. It was like pseudocode, so it was working good enough, but it wasn't good. Oh, yeah. I mean, there's a lot. I don't know what a good programmer portfolio looks like. I also wouldn't say that I'm super knowledgeable about what a good game design portfolio looks like. But what I can definitely say is from what Tim said, I would also consider those to be very, very important to have as a designer, and is one of the things that I'm trying to work on just in case Microraptor Games goes tits up and I got to find another job. I want to make sure that I stand above the crowd and show that I've learned more than, sounds kind of egotistical, but I've learned more than they have. Hopefully, I know that I haven't, but I'm trying to, just get to that top of the pile so that I can try to look for my future. But if you guys like that video, give it a like. Go give Tim a subscription. He has 170,000 subs. Go get him up to 200,000. Here's the link, and if you're watching on YouTube, I really appreciate you watching that one. We had a lot to say, and I will see you on the next one. I think I have enough time for one more today, so if you're watching this one, we'll have one more up today. Bye, YouTube.